variety of reasons, one of which is that you can sit if you want to sit, that's fine too, but some people might prefer to stand. We're not going to talk very long here, but you know, there's a kind of trajectory of people who are involved and who are here in this room tonight. I want to say that Chris, his book is introduced by and very nicely introduced by Eboo Patel, who was just mentioned. And his colleague here is Greg Epstein. This has been a great group for us. When Dorothy and I, my spouse now, first moved into Lowell House, Eboo Patel came, I was back in 1999, and sat on our terrace and said, what should I do when I come back here to the United States from having been in England? I said, well, both of us said, you got to work with young people. That's really, you know, all those old people in the interfaith movement are all, they go to the same things, they circulate around and wear their outfits and their costumes, but this is not where the future is. And he went off and did some wonderful things, and Chris worked with him. It was just such a delight. And then Greg Epstein showed up here, and he was in one of my classes, full and full. And he came into my office after, I said, you know, you ought to write a book, Greg. This is good. You know, don't keep arguing with me about my book. Write your own. So he did. And now we have this wonderful book from Chris Stedman. I have to say, I've actually talked about this book already. Dorothy and I were in Stockholm 2 weeks ago. I gave an interfaith lecture in honor of the former dean of this school, Mr. Stendhal, who's very active in interfaith affairs and who died a few years back. And Sweden is an interesting place. It is my natal family place, but it also is a place that is second only to North Korea in the number of atheists it has. 11% of the population is atheist, and yet it's a very socially progressive country, one in which people really do care for each other from birth to death and beyond, really. So it was really interesting, and I mentioned Greg Epstein's Good Without God and Chris Stedman's forthcoming Faitheist, and I must say they were fascinated with this aspect of American religiousness. This was the same week that The Rise of the Nuns was published by Pew. That's the N-O-N-E-S, not the ones who are, they're pretty good too. I wish that the nuns who were on the bus were also rising. And but this is the rise up to a point of 19.3% of America's population that now says that they don't feel they belong to any religious faith or religion, however they think of that. And among young people, and that includes so many of you, most of you in this room, it's 1 in 3. So we have to take that seriously, and that doesn't mean that these are all the Dawkins and Dennett and Harris and Hitchens kind of atheists either. It means that this is a whole generation of people who don't identify with the sort of container idea of religion in quite the same way. And that is what Chris Stedman has really given us, but from many standpoints, the wonderful progression of this book from what he describes as my closeted queer adolescent mind, where he had his study page Bible with all the pages in Leviticus turned down at the corner, to his encounter with the wonderful Pastor Dale, who went through that Bible and just put a big X on those pages and said, you know, forget, he should have torn them out. He did a lot of great things, and Chris has encountered a lot of different kinds of Christians. So it's not as if he has just met the stereotypical fundamentalist Christians. He has encountered other Christian kids, and young men. I met the famous John of chapter 4. John, are you here tonight? Come on. Wonderful, wonderful. I already feel as if he's part of the family. And yet, at some point, he says, I didn't really know how it happened, but God just moved out. He wasn't throwing God out, or he wasn't a strident atheist, but has really come to see that God had, as he put it, disappeared, packed up and moved out. And yet, there is so much that Chris has continued to evolve. I don't know where it is, but somewhere upon his person there's a little tattoo that has a verse that says, "Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it will be but a grain of wheat, but if it dies, it will bear much fruit."
It's on his calf.
What's that? On the calf. Is that sorry? Well, I didn't want to expose that. Anyway. So, he has done a real service for humanists and atheists and all of the nuns who have not really found a home in one of the religious communities that we know now, but are in the process of creating communities and bearing the responsibility as citizens and as human beings for one another, and for fighting tribalism and xenophobia and fanaticism, and promoting, as he puts it, critical thinking and education and religious liberty and compassion and pluralism. And I feel, I've only met Chris Stedman once before tonight, but I feel he's already sort of part of a much larger family of people who believe in these ideals, as so many of you do here. And he puts it several times toward the end, "I can't believe I do this for a living." I've always felt that way myself, as I'm sure others have. So, this is his first memoir. He says it's a little embarrassing to have written a memoir before the age of 25. So we have to say it's his first memoir. And we so look forward to the rest. And it is such an honor to be here tonight, Chris, and to be able to say, let us all join and welcome the author of Faitheist, Chris Stedman.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to keep my remarks here at the beginning very brief, and then I'm just going to dive right into the reading. We've been very fortunate already to hear from 3 individuals who have put so much work into this event tonight and into the ideals that I hope that this book promotes and that so many other people in this room are working day in and day out to promote. So I feel that I don't really need to say much more except thank you. I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you to everyone who's here tonight and to so many other people who have influenced me and who have played a role in this book coming to be, who couldn't make it here tonight. But I want to give a special thank you to my coworkers at the humanist community at Harvard, who I have the great pleasure of working with day in and day out, who are working alongside me in the trenches, and so many other people in this room who are doing that same work, just not at the humanist community at Harvard. And I also want to give a special thank you to my boyfriend Alex, who is obnoxiously taking photos. Alex and I started dating about a year ago, right before I handed in my final manuscript for Faitheist. And so we met about a month before I handed it in, so he's been there for the last year, and when we first started dating, things were really crazy, and they've only gotten crazier. So I just want to take this opportunity in front of everyone to say thank you, Alex, for your patience and your support and your empathy at the times when I've really needed it. So, thank you. And that goes for all of you who are here tonight and so many other people who couldn't be here, but it especially goes to you, Alex, because you bear the brunt of it. now that I've said thank you, which is the main thing that I wanted to get up here and say, I'm just going to jump right into reading an excerpt from the book, if that's all right. So I was really wrestling with what I wanted to read tonight. I felt like there were a couple of excerpts that were sort of a little bit more obvious, and I decided that I wanted to choose a story that is one of a number of stories that I share in this book, but that I think is sort of central to, it centrally embodies the idea, or the idea that I am trying to put forth in this book, but also just the way that I try to live my life. And so, with that being said, this excerpt is kind of personal, and I just felt like I wanted to share a little bit of that with all of you tonight. So.